before we jump into some talks about Mark, I want to thank Pam for putting this party together. I've had the pleasure of working with Mark for 16 years. But in this room, that makes me somewhat of a newbie. I think most of the people in this room have worked with Mark for 25 plus years, some closer to 40 years. So, but it's been my pleasure really to work with Mark for the past 16 years. So Mark inherited me when he came over from UBS to run Piper, California. And as a developing CFD banker in 2008 and being part of the old regime, I'm still kind of shocked that he didn't fire me. I appreciate that he didn't fire me. And instead he took the complete opposite approach. He worked with me, helped me build my business, and really helped me grow within the industry. And like he has for so many in this room, he became a great resource, a great mentor, and a great friend over the past 16 years. And as I got to know Mark and know others in the industry that know Mark, my situation was not unique. Mark was a great sounding board and friend to so many in our public finance business, regardless of whether you worked for him or not. Mark, thank you for everything you've done for me, as well as everyone else that you've worked with. It's going to be hard not to be able to call you and bounce some ideas off you, give you counsel or something, or have you talk me down when I'm spiraling on some ridiculous detail. You will be missed, but I'm very happy for you and your family on your very well-deserved retirement. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
No one really asked me to speak, but I'm here to speak on behalf of Rich Calabro. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us this evening, but I'll read off what he wanted to share with you tonight, Mark. He says, "Dear Mark, feel the affection here. I wish I could be there to celebrate your special day. As you may or may not recall, our first meeting was at the good old House of Pain, in parentheses, House of Pain Weber, New York City, for an aquarium project." You may remember that. All that I remember was us talking more about our Cleveland Browns struggles. And he says, "Wouldn't you know it, they did it again last night against the Elway's Broncos." And Rich goes on to say, 28 and a half years, he and you have survived scores of different things. Senior substructures, JPA bonds, lease revenue bonds, CFDs, Disney bonds, BABs and CABs and QZABs, all of the Great Recessions, Northern Mariner bonds, MCDC, scores of UBS Payne Weber name changes, UBS Payne Weber, UBS Investment Bank, UBS Securities, UBS Financial, UBS, the Great Recession, financial crisis, and now Piper Sandler. I will always remember that day you gave UBS management the heated pep talk to finally fire us so that we could move to Piper Sandler and join Frank Fairman and his team in less than 24 hours. You were not only my mentor, but my friend to discuss the ups and downs of life in and outside the office, especially our beloved Browns and basketball fantasy teams. He says, "Enjoy your retirement." And that was Rich. And I like to say, while I have this opportunity, a couple of words about you, since no one asked me to be here, but since I'm here. Mark, one thing that Dan was saying, he described you as a partner and a friend. And when I think about you, Mark, I think of a leader. And I think you demonstrate the kind of leadership qualities that I would like to strive to be. You demonstrate a level of even keelness, dealing with all of the different personalities here, different egos, different objectives and strengths. And you've always managed to keep the team together. And as I've gotten older, and hopefully I have more years to mature, but it's so hard for me to imagine how difficult that must have been for you to internalize all of that. And I want to say thank you for that, because there are days when I vent out to you, and you were always very kind. And as all of us mature, I will always remember you. And I want to say thank you for never firing me. And thank you for always letting me know when you've made those firings, and thank you for doing those when I'm on vacation. So I want to say thank you so much. I think Mr. Barrington is next.
I was asked to say a few words about Mark, and I was thinking I could tell a few stories, because there are a few stories. But what I really wanted to do is talk about the Mark I know, and probably that you guys know, and some of the characteristics and things that, you know, has really resonated in all of our lives, everything that we've seen from Mark. I met Mark April of 1987. I've been hired by Drexel in New York, but they needed a banker in California. So I flew out to interview, meet the group in California. It was Predator Ball weekend in Beverly Hills, so it's the first time I'd ever seen gridlock with limousines. If you're under the age of like 30, you'll have to Google Predators Ball. But Mark and I have known each other a long time, and it started that June, and Mark immediately became a mentor to me, just teaching me how the business worked, and I've seen through the years how he's mentored other people, and it's a combination of bond math and finance skills and new business skills and people skills, and you know, that mentorship has been great to me and has meant a lot to me over the years. But in addition to being a mentor, he was a teacher, and he was always reviewing my work, trying to make it better. As he would rub his head looking at my numbers, trying to figure out if they made sense or not, or where the errors were, but it was always an improvement at the end of the day, and I certainly appreciated that. Over time, he became a manager, and he's manager to a number of people in this room. And the great thing about Mark as a manager is he never really told me what to do. One time he told me what to do. He said, you know, it's August of 97. He came to me and said, "You're not doing anything else for the next 6 months or until we close the Disney transaction." And it turned out to be, I mean, I wasn't completely on board with it when he came to me, but I'd never done anything like that before. But you know, that him being a manager and sort of guiding me through and directing us and our teams through the business has been really great to see. But ultimately, he's a friend, and that friendship has lasted for 37 and a half years. It's gone through births and deaths and marriages and sort of every up and down in life, multiple firms, multiple career industry events, if you will. And that friendship has meant a lot to me, and I'm sure everybody in this room can see that as well. I think that when people ask me about Mark and sort of how would you describe him, or you know, what's your relationship or whatever, I mean, what I generally say is he's a partner. I mean, he is my partner, and you know, from the beginning, it always felt like a partnership. I mean, back to Pleasanton when we were trying to convince Sue and Dave we could do something that had never been done before in 75 days, and end up doing it. I appreciated your support then, because I may have been a little crazy. But all the way through the Irvine Company, where, you know, Mark saw that, you know, my relationship was the right relationship for that client at that time. And just being able to work side by side for almost 40 years has been a lot. And I think in closing, what I'd like to say is I'm sure everybody in this room has seen a piece of those Marks. You know, the teacher, the manager, the mentor, the friend. And I just wanted to share some of my thoughts that he's been all of those to me. And thank you. Congratulations.
And a speaker who was going to talk to you, so. Turn it over to him.
Those of you who know me know that attending company social functions was never my thing. But this is a special event, and sometimes exceptions need to be made. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim Carty. I professionally go back with Mark the farthest of anyone, 40 and a half years before I retired myself at the beginning here of 2025. It's hard to be the last speaker, particularly after such eloquent commentary from Dan and Jen and Frank, but I thought maybe I could offer a couple of thoughts on Mark's and his family's special event here. I think you heard, and those of you who've worked with Mark know this, but you heard this from the previous speakers, but I do think that, and having worked in the business a long time, I saw finance professionals come and go, and there will only be one Mark. I really think Mark was a unicorn in the investment banking business. And you heard this again from the other speakers, because Mark had this just unusual combination of wonderful intelligence, an intuitive understanding of investment banking, everything from numbers to credit quality to the big picture in terms of how the industry worked, what motivates firms, what motivates people. And then Mark also had this, I think there's 5 things I can think of. A third thing is just a wonderful sense of business ethics. There was never a line Mark crossed, there was never a corner Mark cut. And then in terms of his leadership, the ability to resolve conflict, to soothe egos, to comfort folks who thought maybe the conversation wasn't what it should have been, the ability to do all of that without losing his temper, without offending anyone, was just, I think, a marvelous way to be a leader. And then finally, from Dan and Frank, you heard the word friend a lot. And I think Mark was able to do all of these things while being a friend. The folks here that are with Piper Sandler, I think, will view Mark, view Mark as a lifelong friend. And then those of you who technically have been Mark's competitors also viewed him as a friend. Mark is, in the financial services world, is liked by everyone. And I can say that as someone who certainly was not liked by everyone. But again, I just think Mark was one of a kind, and there won't be another one like him. That's one thought I wanted to share. Then there's 2 thoughts that are just on a personal note. And Dan talked a little bit about this, but I don't know whether or not I had any success in the investment banking world, but if I did, I owe almost all of it to Mark. When I started June 1st of 1983 at Drexel Burnham in New York, I knew nothing about nothing. I had gone directly from undergraduate to business school, which is unheard of today, but was rare even then. I was 24 years old, and I knew nothing. And Mark, immediately took me under his wing and taught me the dead basics, how to dress professionally, how to be on time for things. Remember, this was the pre-computer age. The fax machine was still a new invention. And Mark taught me the importance of organization. Mark would have this yellow pad, legal sized, and would write down all the projects he was working on, the tasks that needed to be completed, in what order, on what day. And I still use that technique today in my own personal life. I will make lists of things and try to be organized and complete the task at hand. I learned that from Mark. And you know, I also learned from Mark, and you heard this, I think, with Dan's commentary, but I learned the importance of paying attention to detail and being precise in terms of numbers, in terms of documents, in terms of slide decks, you know, looking for numbers that are out of place, looking for the occasional typo. I learned all that stuff from Mark. And then when we came to California, so Mark came out to California about 6 months before I did. And I came out to California, I'd never been here before. And again, I mean, Mark helped me with, where to find an apartment, how to buy a car, where to look to find a primary care doctor, how to do my taxes. I mean, I had no clue as to how to do any of these things. So really that combination of the first year we spent together at Drexel Burnham in New York, and then the initial year when we were out here together in California, I mean, without Mark, I mean, I owe, you know, all of my career and any success I might have had is, you heard the term, you know, mentor from Jim and Dan. Certainly the same applies for me as guidance and as teacher. Another thing that I'll say on the personal note, and Mark may smile and remember this, that in the early days of Drexel Burnham, one of our mentors said, you know, if you're a giant in the investment banking industry, and you have an outstanding career, you will lose your job and be out on the street at least 2 or 3 times. And of course, that's what happened to us. Drexel Burnham went bankrupt in February of 1990, and then we were looking for a job, and we came to Paint by Bird. And then when UBS closed its doors in 2008, and we came to Piper Jaffray at the time. So there were 2 occasions where we needed to find jobs. There was never 1 minute where I ever thought that Mark and I were anything other than a package deal. And you may remember this, Mark, but when we, the second time, were leaving UBS and eventually came to Piper Jaffray, you said to me, you know, Tim, you ought to think about separating out and going off on your own. You have clients and you could make more money. And I didn't consider that for 1 minute. I always thought that there was far more value in having a friend, confidant with you than necessarily grabbing the last dollar on the table. You know, mistakes get made in investment banking, and you get put into sticky situations, and you don't always see the solution. And so the ability to have someone that has your back, that can help you fix the problem, I just felt, I never, Mark, entertained a minute where we wouldn't be working together. And the last thing I would say, having a year's leg up on you in this retirement gig, is, you know, at these retirement events, you have this vibe that it's the end of something, right? It's the conclusion of something. Something is coming to a close. But I tend to think of life as it's a 3-act play, right? You know, Act 1 is birth to the completion of your education, right? And then Act 2 is your professional years, your income earning years, and your child rearing years. And then you get to Act 3, when hopefully, you know, you've got some financial security, and Act 3 can be uncertain and unknown, as Frank mentioned. You know, I know you do a lot, you give a lot, you're a lot of interests in charitable causes and so forth, but you have a lot left to give. And don't view this as the end of it. Write a book, teach business ethics at John Carroll University, run for local town council, local school board or something. You have so much to give. Your skill level has not diminished one bit since We started working together, 41 years ago. So anyway, again, the speakers before me were marvelous and said I can't add much to that, but I did just want to come tonight and say a few words and wish Mark the best and say hello and good night to all of you. So thanks for letting me be here.
And we're a financial advisory firm, California Financial Services. I had the pleasure of first working with Mark and his team back in 1990, and we've been working together on many projects over the years. Now, I've heard a lot of good words about Mark, and I have a different take. My take to all of you that are still working at Piper that work with Mark, the living hell is about over. He's about to retire. All kidding aside, I have very few friends in the world. He wasn't just a business associate of mine, he's a personal friend. And as a reward to you, Mark, Trish has invited myself and my wife to visit for 2 months a year, staying at your home in Cleveland. So I'm going to take you up on your offer. You will be in touch with me because I'm going to call you periodically. And it has been an absolute joy working with you all of these years. But the friendship that I have with you is extremely special to me, and I'll always appreciate it. Thank you, Mark.
I've already touched on the Cleveland Browns. I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes here. So, I'm Frank Fairman. For those of you who don't remember me, I retired 3 months ago. I headed up public finance at Piper, just retired from my own 41-year career. Was fortunate to have Mark as part of our leadership group in public finance for the last 16 years. I was honored to work with him. And I guess the first lesson you learn in retirement, Mark, is that people stop taking your advice very quickly and forget you just as quickly as well. But I'm sure you're going to figure out how to adapt to that the way I've been adapting to it myself. But I'm not happy for those of you who don't remember. So I want to talk a little bit about just the legacy and legend of Mark Adler in this business. And really it is an incredible legend. He was in the business for 42 years, starting in 1982. He worked at 3 different firms, Drexel, kind of the UBS, Payne Weber combo, and then Piper. He never left a job voluntarily. He had 2 firms that kind of went out of business under his watch. But who were market leaders at that time. Moved to California very early in his career, built and sustained a market-leading practice in California in the land secured space and in the K-12 and community college space, where he built, really and oversaw the biggest business and the biggest market in the country in public finance. Joined Piper in 2008 after UBS got out of the business for the first time, and has led Piper's practice since then. And really is retiring now with an incredible legacy of success. So I want to talk a little bit about just when I first met Mark, which was the spring of 2008, where UBS had announced that they were getting out of the business. And Piper was one of about a dozen firms who were interested in hiring Mark and hiring his team based on sort of what they had built. So I knew of Mark, I knew of his team, but I had never met him at that time. Ironically, we actually both went to Wharton together. Mark graduated in 1982, I graduated in 1983, but we never crossed paths there, although I did look in the yearbook, and before I met Mark for the first time, he had a lot more hair in that picture in the yearbook than he did when I met him in 2008. So we had reached out to several members of his team, talking to them about joining Piper, and every one of them said the same thing. Basically, you need to meet with Mark. That everybody on his team basically trusted Mark to say, to figure out what was the right course and the right path for the entire group. So when I met Mark for the first time, he wasn't really what I expected. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but I thought that as a Wall Street banker, he might be this hard-charging, kind of aggressive, possibly a little bit arrogant type of personality. But what I found was really the complete opposite. I found someone who was down to earth, polite, professional, and in fact was a humble Cleveland Browns fan. So I didn't hold that against him because I actually grew up in Pittsburgh. So both Mark and I shared the legacy of growing up in the Rust Belt, watching our, in the era where our cities were under decline. But in Pittsburgh, when I grew up, that all the buildings were completely black from all the soot and the smoke from the steel mills. In Cleveland, where Mark grew up, the river caught on fire. So we had that in common. A difference between the two of us, though, was that I grew up rooting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 4 Super Bowls, a legacy of championships. Whereas Mark, unfortunately, grew up with the pain of losing seasons, tragic losses, and ultimately seeing his team leave to go to Baltimore for greener pastures. But we seem to get along. I feel like it was incredibly fortunate that Mark agreed to join Piper and join our team based on that one meeting. And it was really an important moment for Piper and for our business. The 2008 was a tough year. Our business was under a lot of stress. Adding Mark and his team and what they brought to us, really was a big, momentum builder for our business, and really allowed us to accelerate our growth and our success, from the business that they brought to us. So, Mark, I'm forever grateful that you agreed to join us at that time and had the opportunity to work with you. So, I was going to make an analogy. I was trying to think of sort of what's the right analogy for Mark's career. And as some of you know, I own a house in Palm Springs, and about a week ago was sitting in my hot tub trying to think about what am I going to say in this speech. And I happened to be listening to Frank Sinatra, whose house actually is not too far from where we live. The song My Way came on. And I thought that, gee, this is a great analogy for Mark and his career. That there's really, I can't think of anybody who, over the course of their career, has done it more their own way than Mark. And I don't mean my way as in like my way or the highway, because that's certainly not Mark in any way. I just mean that he created a very unique path for his career that really is non-replicable. So, and I would say first off, just the idea that Mark 30 years ago decided to move from California to Cleveland to raise his family while leading a very successful business in California, and was able to continue that success. From my standpoint, I think most of us, if we tried to pull off that move, would have ended up with career suicide and an ugly divorce. But Mark somehow managed to make that work for all these years, commuting back and forth from Cleveland. This is a guy that doesn't even like to fly. And was working remotely before there was even email. So sort of was a pioneer in that regard. But as some of you know, Mark is only comfortable flying in aisle seats. So somehow he managed for 30 years to fly back and forth and always get an aisle seat, which is a very important thing. I just don't know anybody else who kind of sort of pulled that off in the way that Mark did. I would say, in addition, Mark really, is sort of different from the norm of public finance bankers and leaders in this industry. That, in an industry that's full of a lot of egos, where there's a lot of focus on money and compensation, Mark always put his team first, others in front of himself, and stuck with his core values. That he always focused on just serving clients and the success of his team and their business, not his own success. And he was always worked hard to assure that everybody else on his team was paid fairly. He was the last person to worry about his own personal compensation. Leo DeRocher, the manager for the Chicago Cubs years ago, famously said, "Nice guys finish last." Well, Mark is the ultimate nice guy, and somehow he managed to finish first all the time. So congratulations on that. I would say, in addition, Mark is just sort of a uniquely smart and strategic banker in this industry. He's got a complete understanding of the business. As a banker, he was very innovative and creative. As a leader, he was always a strategic thinker. He was always thinking ahead of things to assure that his team was prepared for whatever was going to come up next in this business, was going to be successful in that. And then, in addition, Mark was always just true to the person that he wanted to be and the values that he had. I mean, Mark's a very caring person. He's very interested in people and always focused on others. He's a great communicator. Who's honest. He's just direct as a manager. But Mark's also fearless, courageous when he needed to be. And an example of this is just recently, this fall, at the Cleveland Browns game. Mark decided that he had to take on a Baltimore Ravens fan who was harassing his group. And this fan happened to be about twice Mark's size, but Mark was ready and willing to step in. And he's actually very proud of this story. He told me this at that weekend after getting kicked out. This was like the pinnacle of his family. Getting kicked out of a Browns game for taking on a Ravens fan. But I would say, fortunately, security was right on the scene and prevented Mark from really, hurting this poor guy. So, and I would say, Mark always defended his own team in this business with that same intensity and courage that he demonstrated there. So, and I would also say Mark is just a very committed member of all the various communities that he's been part of, whether it's Cleveland, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's the Jewish community that Mark is part of and proud of, that he's always been highly involved in the public finance world. He was very respected throughout the California public finance world. He's always done a great job of making, many long-term friendships, and he's great at maintaining those friendships. I'm assuming that just this last weekend, Mark played football with his high school friends in the, I think is it the 49th annual Turkey Bowl in Cleveland, which gives you a sense of just Mark's ability to maintain relationships over time. So I would just say Mark is really just a true mensch. He's respected and liked by everybody. Now, in terms of what Mark leaves behind, you leave behind an incredible legacy, a strong business for Piper. Your DNA is going to be part of our California business for a long time, whether they remember you or not. But we wish you well in your retirement. I'm confident that you're going to do it your own unique way in retirement, just the way you have in your career. I know that you're going to continue to spend time in Cleveland and LA, but it seems like you might add a third destination to this. It sounds like you might be spending some time in Australia if your daughter and son-in-law move back there. I would say most of us thought you already lived kind of down under when you were in Cleveland. But it sounds like you're really going to move down under. The one comment I would make is that when you go to Australia, it might be hard to watch the Cleveland Browns games, because those games, I looked it up, they're actually, the Sunday 1 o'clock game on the East Coast is actually on at 4 a.m. on Monday night. So you're going to have to watch those on Monday night. And then my understanding is also that when you get to the Southern Hemisphere, that you have to turn the TV upside down because the broadcast comes in upside down. But I'm sure you're going to find a way and you'll be watching. So I'll just close with a short quote from Frank Sinatra and his song My Way that I think describes your incredibly unique career. The song goes, I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway, but much, much more than this, I did it my way. So best of luck to you and Trish in retirement. Congratulations on your incredible career. Thanks for everything that you've done for me and for everybody else in this room. And you clearly did it your way.
2 years. I've been as half a boss for 18 months. So, a lot of positive things said about Mark. I think it's really impressive, whether it's current colleagues, former colleagues, industry friends, family that are here this evening. Mark is someone who deserves it. So I'm glad we're here to celebrate Mark this evening. You know, I wrote down a few comments here. I think a lot of it's been said very, very well by all the speakers this evening. I would say in the last 14 months, we've certainly appreciated your leadership, helping us in our new roles at Piper Sandler. I would say Mark's approach to leadership is one of a kind. I think probably Frank said it best. It's never about him. It's always about those he supports and those he works with and those he cares about. And his humility and his humor and his wit in this business is something that we'll never forget. The impact he's had on the business, obviously, on all of us in this room is long-lasting and meaningful. And it's a career and a legacy that we'll never forget. So thank you for all you've done, Mark. I want to, as a token of our appreciation, it's hard to celebrate 42 years in this business, and what do you give somebody who's done so much for everybody else? Mark has done a lot for other people as well, and one of those organizations is ORT America. So on behalf of public finance at Piper Sandler, we are making a special donation to ORT America in honor of Mark's 4+ decades in this business and the impact he has had on many of us in this room this evening, among many, many others. We know ORT America is a special organization for you and your family. So on behalf of Piper, in recognition of Mark Adler for 16 years of dedication and leadership at Piper Sandler, and as a gift to you, we are proud to make a donation to ORT America in the amount of $5,000. I do want to read this quote. So we did notify ORT America of the donation in Mark's name. I think it's worthwhile to make a comment related to ORT's quote here. It says, quote, Mark has been a dedicated leader of ORT for over 20 years. ORT is the only global Jewish educational network that provides students with a premier education to prepare them for lifelong success. I believe it's over 200,000 students. Mark has been involved at the local and national level, serving as a board member and in various positions as an executive committee member. Mark and his wife have an impressive commitment to and involvement in the Cleveland Jewish community, to Israel, and to education. Thank you, Mark.
Jen, Dennis, Dan, I really mean it when I've really been touched by your words, even though I'm sure half of them weren't true and you had to exaggerate a bit there, but we'll go with it for tonight. But I would want to thank Pam for putting tonight together. Really has meant a lot to me. And I really feel I have a lot to be thankful for. I have loved this industry. I've loved the people that have been in the industry. I've loved what we have accomplished. When I say we, it really has been a team in what we do. And that's what I really have loved about that. I've been lucky to have so many mentors myself in this business. I started at Drexel Burnham as the lone associate with 4 vice presidents and a managing director. So I became the go-to person and immediately had all those mentors. Within a year and a half, they sent me out to California, and one of the first deals I had was the city of Barstow, a 1915 Act assessment district deal in which Fritz Stradling was bond counsel and underwriter's counsel. You could do that back then. A complicated deal. We got to the end, and at the closing, I said to Fritz, I thanked him because he truly was a mentor to me, and I said to him, you know, I really did not know what I was doing on this transaction. And Fritz said, yes, I know. But then he said, now you do. And in this business, you do one transaction, you're an expert. and his words rang true. But I also had mentors when I went to Payne Weber and with Terry Atkinson supporting my decision to move to Cleveland. And certainly, I've always felt in joining Piper Sandler, having Frank Fairman as a mentor and my boss was a great career move for me and our group. So I can't tell you how lucky I am. But there's one thing I was thinking today as I was looking forward to tonight, and I had this feeling that I had not had since really the first day of working at Drexel Burnham. And I remember taking that subway down to Wall Street from the Upper East Side and getting off at Wall Street and walking down to 60 Broad Street and thinking to myself, so sad that I was leaving my school days behind. And I loved school. I loved the friends that I made. And I was thinking, you know, this is sad. But at the same time, I also had that feeling of excitement for the next chapter. Here I was, 23 years old, working on Wall Street. But I was also scared. So I was so scared at what the next chapter could I succeed at. And I never had that feeling again. I certainly did not have that feeling when I married Trish. I was not scared. When we had Samantha and Shelby, it was just excitement. And I really never experienced that feeling until today. I'm sad to be leaving this business that I've loved and the relationships that I've made and what we have done together. I'm a bit scared about the next chapter in life and what that would bring. But I would tell you, like I was 42 years ago, I am excited for the next chapter and the next adventure. And I agree with Tim. This is the beginning of Act 3. And my hope is all of you are somehow part of that and that we keep in touch and we keep having the type of relationships that we've been able to develop over these last 40 years. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of my life, and I am forever grateful.